Welcome back. So, in last lecture we stopped here where we were talking about the mountain front sinuosity, and as I told that you can use these two measurements. What you are having here is one is your the straight length of the front and the dissected one, and that you can use having a very simple expression. You are having LMF by LS. So, mostly as I also suggested in the previous lecture that for mountain front, if you need to define that, then it is a topographic escarpment bounded by major faults with measurable relief exceeding one contour interval of 20 meters. So, if you are using topographic maps, you can use the 20 meter contour in that, and that interval has to be 20 meter, around 20 meter. But nevertheless, as you can also use the high resolution satellite data, which can help in identifying the front and extracting the front. So, nowadays what we do is that we use high resolution stereo pair photographs, and in one of the exercise or the lab you have done that generation of anaglyph. So, based on that you can generate a digital elevation model, or you can say digital surface model, and from that you can extract your mountain fronts. Okay. So, this you can do it on the digital platform. Okay. So, mountain fronts are classified as internal fronts. So, suppose you are having, like for example, you are having contour here and then you are having the streams which are flowing across this. So, internal fronts could be away from the main mountain fronts. Okay. So, this can be classified as internal mountain fronts. So, internal and external fronts, as I have explained. Now, depending on whether they occur within the mountain terrain. Okay. So, mountainous terrain, that based on that you can classify whether it is internal or external one. So, for example, if we take further, as I was mentioning, that you have having this is your the frontal area, and then internal fronts could be something over at the in the hinterland side. Okay. Now, usually it has been taken that this marks as a boundary between the mountainous chain and the adjoining alluvial or the coastal plains. Okay. As we have seen one of the example of the sub-Himalayas and the Indo-Gangetic plain. Now, the values of SMF approaching 1, if the approach is 1, are considered to be most active fronts. Okay. So, depending on the values of what you get, S is equal to LMF and by LS straight length. So, then if it is approaching 1, then you can say these are most active fronts. Okay. So, that will again depend on if the fronts are less dissected. Okay. So, that again, and so that will yield less sinuosity in that front. Okay. So, mountain front sinuosity index LMF or S, you can say, you can take as LMF by LS, is a measure of degree of irregularity of sinuosity at the base of the topographic escarpment, where LMF is the length along the topographic mountain front and the Piedmont, and LS is the straight line. This we have already discussed. The morphology of the mountain front depends upon the degree of tectonic activity along the front. Active fronts will show straight profile with lower values of S or SMF and sinuosity of the mountain front. Inactive or less active fronts are marked by irregular or more eroded profiles with higher values of S or your SMF. Okay. So, this is the most important key part that you should remember. Okay. So, if you are having active fronts, then you will have straight profiles. If you are having less active or inactive, you can say, then you will have irregular or more eroded profiles. Okay. So, for example, if I again draw here, then in case of your straight front, it will be something like less eroded, but if you are having more irregular fronts, then these are inactive. So, this is your, so this will yield you higher values and this will yield you lower values. So, this points you should keep in mind when you are extracting this information. Now, coming to the faceted, as I already mentioned in the previous lecture, that we call this as a triangular facets. Okay. So, facet are the triangular to polyhedral shaped hill slopes. So, what we were looking at in one of the satellite data, that it will be something like this, or it can have. So, this will be in sort of a very similar shape it will give that resembles to a triangle. Okay. Or it can have the polyhedral shaped also, that lies between two adjacent drainages. So, one drainage is coming from here, another drainage is coming from here. Okay. So, this will be your faceted front. So, this is what we have looked at. So, if you carefully look, then these are the two drainages which are coming here. So, these are the two drainages which are coming from this side here, and one is coming over here, for example, this two, and in between what we see is your mountain fronts. Okay. So, these are the triangular, or you can say polyhedral shape you are having. Okay. This can be 2 here, and then again you are having over here this one. Okay. So, tectonically active fronts displays prominent large facets that are generated by recurrent faulting. That means, the faulting is continue, it is not showing any sign of quiescence. So, that is your should suggestive of active fronts. So, tectonic activity is more in that area. That means, the front are less dissected. Okay. So, this, as I told, it goes side by side to the mountain front sinoncity also. Less tectonically active front contains fewer smaller facet, whereas means that more dissected fronts because of development of more drainage across the front. So, if you are subjecting area is quiet, no tectonic movement is taking place. So, that area will be subjected to more erosion over the time, hence you will see more dissected fronts. Okay. And this is for the case of less tectonically active regions. Okay. So, this points you can keep in mind along with the mountain front sinoncity what we have done. So, you can even try to obtain the S, or you can say SMF, okay, and then percentage of facets. Okay. So, these are the two parameters one can use to understand the influence of tectonic activity. So, this is a mosaic photograph from Himalaya, but this is a hinterland site. Of course, these are all what we see is the lesser Himalayas. This is lesser Himalaya, and if you carefully look at it, you will be able to observe that mountain fronts. Okay. And showing triangular facets, typical triangular facets you are able to see here. And then what we were talking about, that this triangular facets will be in between the two drainages. This is what we see here. So, these are typical field example, but as I told that you can use high resolution satellite photographs and then can identify that what is the percentage of the facets available in that area. Depending on the regular or less dissected or more dissected front, you can judge that whether the intensity of the tectonic activity in that area. So, this we have seen that this is what we observed along the front, and these are the parameters which one can take, but for faceted one you can use this one here, that is your left front and this is your right front. Okay. So, based on that you can talk about the percentage of faceting along mountain front, and that is your this is LF, okay, and LS, that is your. So, you can add this two and take the overall length of the complete facets. So, that will give you the percentage how much it is dissected actually. Now, vectic tectonics and river morphology again is a very basic and important topic which we will just discuss. So, active tectonics, usually it has been seen that the modern ongoing deformation is termed as active tectonics. Okay. However, there were three different terms which were been used. One is neotectonic, and we usually call this as a transition boundary between the tertiary and quaternary neogene tectonism, okay, and young tectonics, mainly what we are looking at in the Holocene. So, this is around 10,000 years if we take from present. So, this is the most youngest tectonic domain, and we call this as an late during which has prevailed during late Pleistocene and Holocene time. Okay. Recent tectonic also there is a term which is coming up, and that we call in the last few thousand years, or we can say the upper Holocene portion that we generally, but mostly we use the term active tectonics, okay, for our description or describing the tectonic influence. Okay. So, in spite of the practical significance of understanding active tectonism, only a few investigators have considered its effect on alluvial rivers. Okay. Because it has been seen that this active tectonics, whether it you say young tectonics or recent, it has shown significant manifestation of the ongoing deformation seen in the alluvial rivers. Okay. So, the fluvial anomalies, mainly what we are going to look at in this one. So, that the alluvial channels are sensitive indicator of changes taking place in particular region, either due to climatic or tectonic fluctuations. So, mostly it has been like if we are not very much influenced or biased by the tectonic perturbations and how they are been seen in terms of the landscape evolution, but the climate has also played the important role. So, one has to be extremely careful when we are talking about that whether this landscape was influenced by climate or it has an it was influenced by tectonic fluctuations. So, these two major parameters, okay, are clearly reflected in change in their river, or you can say in the hydrology and the sediment load pattern, because any morphology of the channel will be affected by its hydrology, that is your amount of water available, whether it is high flow regime or low flow regime, or along with that we say the sediment load or the bed load which is coming in, okay, that will change your channel pattern or drainage system will evolve accordingly. Okay. So, experimental as well as field studies have proved that change of valley floor slope will cause change in channel pattern. Okay. So, valley floor slope what we have to consider is that your longitudinal profile. So, this is your profile of any channel or the river profile we can say. So, if there is any change in this, that will will also affect your change in the channel pattern. However, the change will differ depending on type of channels and the amount of rate of deformation. So, this is again we need to take into consideration, because you may have for example, mostly what we have learned in previous lectures, that we will come across, one is the straight channel, another is your meandering channel, and then third one usually we see is the braided one. Okay. So, if we have we consider this three type of drainage, the straight, then meander and braid. So, if we consider this, then what is the change we will be able to observe if there is the change in the your valley floor slope. Okay. So, that part we will see, and best examples which were been given was by mostly the Schum and this paper which was been written, and there is a book also which talks about the influence of active tectonics over alluvial rivers. Okay. So, channel pattern this is again by Schum, which talks about that if you have major 5 you can divide into that depending on the your suspended load, mixed load or the bed load, and a combination of what we have discussed in the previous slide, that is your straight, meandering or braid. Depending on the combination of those also, you can have further division which has been shown here, that is 3B and 3 and 3B. Okay. But in total we will see that there is mainly 3 type of drainage, and as discussed that we can the channel pattern or you can say change in channel pattern will depend on your climatic fluctuations, or you can say tectonic activity, and then second one is your sediment supply. So, this will be your like sediment supply, you can that is your bed load. So, depending on this 2, you will have the change in the channel pattern. So, that what has been shown here. So, you have, like as I told, that you have broadly 3 categories, you have straight, you have meander and you have braid, but then it depends upon again what we were the load, okay, that is sediment load, that is mixed load or bed load here. So, depending on that, this will change. Okay. Now, usually this is for the meander, but that you can I have already discussed this in one of the lecture. So, let us see how this 5 basic drainage pattern, channel pattern is telling the story about the influence of climate and tectonics. Okay. So, 5 it has been shown here, like this is, as I told, that there is a combination of this one where you have the meander with the same width, and here we are having meander with wider width and all that. Okay. So, 5 basic channel patterns. If you take straight channels with either migrating sand waves, pattern 1, this is here 1 here. The second one is pattern 2, you have this one. So, you have migrating alternate bars with sinus thalvage. So, it will show some sort of an sinusity within the straight pattern. Then 2 types of sinus channels which are been shown here. So, this is that you are having 3A, the channel is highly sinus channel, equal width you have. So, this width has been taken into consideration. So, they have the equal width, and a channel which is wider at the bends. So, this is wider as compared to this one here. Okay. So, this is wider at the bends, okay, and the pattern 4 is your meander braided. Okay. So, you have meander as well as you have braided because they are separated by the small islands here. Okay. And the 5th one is the typical braided stream, which are rejoining streams, but are separated by your bars here. Okay. So, river exhibit various channel patterns that can be related to one, variation in the water discharge. This is what we were talking about, that this will also depending on the climatic fluctuations, you will have different discharge here. Okay. So, this is one point you have, and then another is variation in the sediment load, okay, and the presence of the bedrock, because if you are having the channel in the bedrock area, then you will that definitely have to be careful about that. And third one is your human influence, okay, and fourth is your presence of, or you can say that because this we are taking together. So, then tectonic influence, and then of course, you can this too you are talking about the climate. So, these are the parameters or the points which are considered to be influencing the channel pattern in an overall sense. Okay. So, now coming to the that what we were talking about, if you are having the slope and then you have the sinusity, how they have the relation, and how the channel pattern changes if there is a change in the slope actually. Okay. So, experimental relation. So, here if you look at then what we have is you have the slope on the x axis and sinusity, then what is the relation between these two. Okay. And what it has been shown that as you increase the slope here, so the channel which was straight will get into meander, and then finally it will braid actually. Okay. So, this is the channel pattern overall changes as the slope increases. Okay. So, experimental relation between the valley slope and the sinusity, the channel length by valley length you are doing, and mainly the alluvial channels. Okay. So, the relative stability of this channel in terms of their shape and gradient are related to relative sediment size, load, velocity of flow, and stream power. Okay. It has been possible to develop this pattern experimentally by varying the gradient, and this is what we are talking about, the slope actually. So, varying the gradient, sediment load, stream power, and that will be related to the velocity of the water and type of sediment load transported by the channel. So, if we look at that, what are the possible indicators of the active tectonics? So, let us quickly look at this. Okay. So, local development of meanders. So, for example, if you are having so suppose you have a straight channel and then suddenly you get into the local meander. Okay. So, this is what we see is the local development of meanders in the channel, local development of braid pattern. So, you are getting into from the straight, or then you are having meander, and then you are straight away you are having like braided pattern here. Okay. So, you have the braid bars and then braided. So, this when you can say that this is your local meander, and this will be your local braided pattern. Okay. Then local widening and narrowing of the channel. So, this is what we can say that okay, fine, local widening and narrowing is that you have a narrow channel and then suddenly you see a sort of an channel is widening up. Okay, here. So, you have this is again, of course, it will be sort of and slightly some bars will be there, but this is your local widening of the channel, and then local ponding of the channel. Okay. So, when the local ponding, if you take the slope or the gradient, it usually shows like this. Okay. But if you are having some area where so the stream is flowing like this, this is your elevation and this is your distance here, but some portion, if suppose this profile is something like this, okay, then this area is been blocked actually by this rise. Okay. So, this will show ponding condition. So, local ponding also can be taken as an indicator for your tectonic evidence. Okay. So, I will stop here and we will continue with more details in the next lecture. Okay. Thank you so much.